Hey everybody, my name is Peter. I'm here today for SixThreeZero to help you see how to assemble a SixThreeZero multi-speed bike in your own garage. This one is a SixThreeZero PAVEN TRAIL. It's a 21 speed, so it has a front and rear derailleur gears in the front and the back. And so it's a little bit more of a complicated bike, but it's nothing that you should be intimidated by. A lot of times a bike like this will be assembled professionally in a bike shop and a bike stand with certain tools and things like that. You can also do it in your own garage and do a very good job. You don't need a lot of tools. These are pretty basic. We'll need a 4, 5, and 6 millimeter Allen wrench, a 14 millimeter and 15 millimeter wrench. Of course, you can also use a crescent wrench, an adjustable wrench. You'll need a 9 and 10 millimeter socket, and of course, something to open the box up with. All right, let's get started. And so, when you order your bike online, and I know traditionally you would buy a bicycle in a bicycle shop, it's still, with more advanced bikes, racing bikes and mountain bikes, that's always the best idea. For more basic level bikes, recreational bikes like these, it's great. Order online, the internet has changed everything, so let's roll with it. Your bike's going to arrive in a box just like this one, okay? You're going to open it, there's a little parts box. We'll show you that in a moment. And then we'll just lift the bike out of the box. So, here's your bicycle, all packaged and ready to go. I'll leave the box right there, okay? Now the first thing I like to do is I go ahead and just unpack it, take off all the zip ties. Sometimes I leave on some of the packaging, but let's go ahead and take off the zip ties. You can use the box cutters, also some snips are nice to use. Right down here, this is the saddle or seat, and it comes attached to the seat post already. Set that aside there. Okay, that should be all the zip ties now. And the next step is to lift the front wheel out and separate it from the rest of the bike. There's the front wheel, which was zip tied to the rest of the bike. Okay, now, to get started, we want the bike to stand by itself, okay? So what I like to do is, first of all, please notice the fork is always turned backwards for packaging purposes. When you receive the bike, go ahead and turn the fork forward. Okay, so that's a mistake some people make sometimes, is they put the wheel and the fork backwards and take out the packaging item from the fork. And that looks like this. This is not part of the bike, this is packaging. Okay? Now, if you like, what you can do is go ahead and take some of the packaging off of the fork. And what I like to do is go ahead and set the front wheel in to the fork. And then we can put the kickstand down, and the bicycle will hold itself up, and we can start to assemble it. Okay? When you put the front wheel in, the tread is usually directional. It's not a big deal. On a car, it matters to, in case you run into a lot of rain or something for traction, all that. On a bicycle, it's usually not so important, except at like higher levels of performance. If you're confused about which way the tread goes, just look at the rear wheel and match it with the front one. So then we'll just pick up the bike, and we will rest the fork right on the axle. I'm going to have to open the brakes here. Okay? And I'll show you how that works. Very simple. And I'm going to put the kickstand down, and that bike will hold itself up, just like that, okay? So if you look, this front wheel has what's called a quick release. So the axle is not going to protrude outside of the fork. Sometimes this is unusual for people, and they're a little confused by it. This is completely normal. the axle will not protrude outside of the fork. What's going to happen is we're going to go ahead and open this parts box as our next step, okay? If I can find my knife right here. Here's the parts box. Not a lot in it. Pedals. We have some tools actually to help you with assembly and reflectors. Some touch-up paint and quick release. Now, different bikes come with different parts. If the bike that you ordered has different parts, then those will be the parts that you need for the bike. Some have the quick release. This is called a quick release skewer. Okay, some bikes don't. Some bikes may have other accessories that are needed for that bike. If you have extra parts, then you'll need them. If there's some parts here that you don't see in yours, don't worry about it, okay? Now the axle in the front wheel is hollow. And so you can take this quick release skewer and take the nut off of it and slide it through that hollow axle, okay? Now come out the other side. You go ahead and put the little spring and the nut back on this side. It doesn't matter which side the skewer goes, which side the handle of the skewer goes on. Traditionally, it goes on the left-hand side of the bike, so you can grab it with your right hand. I'm going to bring the bike over to you so that I can show you how to clamp it down properly. Okay? So here we have the quick release skewer. Now, I'm going to turn the nut on the other side a little, or actually I'm going to just hold the nut here with my left hand, and I'm going to tighten the handle a little bit until it starts to feel a little bit snug, okay? And then we're simply just going to turn it in to lock it in place, okay? Now, what's the proper amount of tightness? When you close it on the palm of your hand, it should leave a little bit of an impression on your hand, okay? We don't want it loose, but you also don't need to go incredibly tight with it, all right? The main thing is you want a good little solid impression on the palm of your hand. Now this is ready. However, let me make one more note, and this is very important, especially for a multi-speed bike that has handbrakes. You want to make sure this wheel is centered in the fork. It can go either way. It can lean to the left or to the right. If you clamp it in one of these directions, it's going to make the brakes almost impossible to adjust later on, okay? So what we want to do is I like to make sure that I hold it with my left hand perfectly in the center of the fork, and then we'll go ahead and clamp it down. Ready to go? You pick it up, get a little spin, and that's ready. All right, next step. Let's go ahead and put in the handlebars. This part right here that holds the handlebar is called the stem. Sometimes the stem will be attached to the handlebars and you have to slide it into the frame of the bike. Sometimes it comes like this one is already in there. That's because this one is a special type of stem. I don't need to go into the details of what makes it different from the other types. It's a little more than the scope of this video. But all we need to know is that we need to put the handlebars into the stem right now. And we need to do it in the proper direction, okay? So the first thing is I'm going to take my 5mm Allen wrench. Here's the 5. And we're going to loosen these two nuts. I'm sorry, these two bolts for the clamp on the stem. So now we have this removed. Holding on to that, we'll go ahead and slide the packaging over and eventually rip it off. Now this, we want to be very careful that we get this properly placed, okay? Because we want all of the brake lines, brake and gear lines to line up properly so they'll function well, okay? I'm going to rip the owner's manual off here. Let me see if I can show you here. So what we want, it comes just hanging like this, usually, whatever's most natural for it to hang down there when it's packaged. You want to try and twist it a little bit like this so that you have and you can read the left and the right because it'll have the numbers for the gears. And it'll be like this, okay? And then this can be adjusted backwards and forwards for your comfort and convenience, okay? But you see how this cable here is lining up nicely on the left, this one's lining nicely on the right, and then the front brake, the rear brake is crossing over like this, which will make everything turn nicely when the bike is functioning, okay? So make sure that you've got that. It should not be anything like this or more twisted like that. This will make operation of the bicycle difficult. You want just nice, clean flow with the brake and gear cables. Okay. Then we go ahead and put the clamp back on with our 5mm. One little note on this, and this is good for any sort of, anytime you need to attach something with multiple bolts on a car or a bicycle or any other sort of vehicle or mechanical contraption, you want to go ahead and tighten these bolts evenly. So you don't just crank down on one and crank down the other. Do them both evenly, tighten them down both at the same time. Now also, and this applies a lot of times, especially to people who like to work on cars. Cars, you can just crank down them, give them a lot of torque. Bicycles are a little more finicky, a little more delicate. The parts are smaller. You don't need to give all your strength when you're tightening down a bolt. Just give it a nice, whatever you can do with one hand. You don't need to use two hands. You don't need to use a lot of leverage. A little Allen wrench, one hand tight, okay? That'll be all you need to keep those handlebars from slipping, okay? If you over tighten it, you can strip the bolt, and then you're gonna have to wait for a part, and that's that will be lousy. There's no reason for it. Okay, so now we got the handlebars, and we can put in the saddle, the seat, whatever you like to call it. The bike shops we always call it a saddle. Some people prefer seat, it's a more general term. It's already attached to the seat post in this case. Sometimes in the parts box you'll find the seat post that'll be separate from the saddle, okay? In this case we also have, again, another quick release, okay? So, and this is great because and you tighten it the same way, just tighten down a little bit like this, and then go ahead and push it nice and tight with the palm of your hand, leaving that impression on your palm. Okay, the quick release is great because although normally you'll have the seat height where you want it, you can adjust it up and down if you ever feel like it's not quite the right height for you. Another thing too is a lot of times when people lock up their bikes, if you are in a more dangerous area or you may be worried about your bike, you can take this out and take the saddle with you. That may sound silly, but a lot of people get their saddles stolen. And they're hard to lock up. So a lot of times people will actually just throw these in their backpack and there's nothing to steal there, okay? It may also be possible if you have a smaller cable lock to put it down with the rear wheel or whatever and string your cable lock through the rails of the saddle, okay? So we'll go ahead and put the saddle in. So we've got our bike looking just about ready to go, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and adjust the angle on the saddle. This will be a 14mm wrench. Like I said, you can also use a crescent wrench, an adjustable wrench. I'm sorry, this style, a lot of times it's either 14mm. In this case, it's actually a 6mm Allen wrench, okay? So I'm going to loosen the bolt down here. I think the robot put that one a little tight. There we go. Now, what is the right level for a saddle? Well, the main thing is you want to look at the general shape of it and make it level with the ground. However, you really don't know until you sit on it. If if it feels like it's sloping down too much for you, then point up a little bit. If that's uncomfortable, then adjust it that way. But anyway, for general, you're going to want to make just the general, because it's curved, you want to think of just the general level of the saddle is parallel with the ground. That's a good place to start. And then you can decide later on when you're actually riding if that's right for you or not. And then we just tighten it back down. You can also slide the saddle back and forward a little bit on the rails, okay? All right. I'll take a little bit of this packaging off, just so we can see what we're working with. You may like to leave the packaging on. It will protect the bike while you're working on it. Can't hurt. But we'll take it off just so that everything's nice and clear for you. A lot of times when I used to assemble bicycles in a shop, I would actually leave the packaging on till the very end. Because then I would make sure that if somehow a tool slipped or something else happened, the bike was protected during the process. Okay, next thing, pedals. Please note, this is something that a lot of people don't realize, and there's no way you would know unless you're in the bicycle world at all. There's a left pedal and a right pedal. This is very important because for the safety of the bike, so that the pedals don't unscrew while you're riding it, the left pedal is reverse threaded. So the right pedal is righty-tighty, the left pedal is lefty-tighty. So you want to turn it in the opposite direction, okay? The way I think of it is both of them also you can turn towards the front of the bike when you're installing them into the cranks, okay? So we'll do the right one here. Very simple. Now at a bike shop we will put grease on the pedals. That's always optimal. Put a little bit of grease on the threads. Certainly not necessary, but is a nice touch. Okay, and then we'll take the 15mm wrench. Pedals are always a 15. Put it on, grab my other crank, and tighten that one up. Go ahead and make that one nice and tight. Now I'm going to turn the bike around. I'm actually going to do it a little bit like this, okay? See if we can make this as clear as possible. This is the left pedal. This one is reverse threaded, so it's also going to go turning towards the front of the bike, but which is in the leftward direction, which normally would be loosening the threads. In this case, it's tightening. So the left pedal is reverse threaded. You don't need to give us a call and tell us that the left pedal is not threading in. It's right. I mean, it's correct, let's say. And then again with the 15, we go in here and tighten it on down. Okay. Pretty quick, straightforward process, and this is as complicated as a bicycle gets. Even mountain bikes are no more complicated than this because they're still going to have the front gears, the rear gears, the hand brakes, the shocks, all of that. This is as hard as it gets, and it's not that bad. Okay, we're already about halfway done. We're going to do the brakes and the gears next, and then we'll assemble this rack. I'm not going to assemble the rack yet. I'm not going to bolt it in because it'll be in the way of the brakes and just make it a little more difficult for me. Okay, so we'll hold on to that. Let's do the brakes. I'm going to do this up close because these are a little bit tricky the first time you do it. Okay? Good. So all we need for this particular type of brake is the 5mm. Okay? 5mm Allen wrench. Okay? What we have here are the brakes are two sides. Okay, like this, and they're just spring operated. If you squeeze them in, they want to squeeze back out. They want to pull back out because of the spring, okay? What we want to do first is adjust the pads. And I will, let's see, I'll do this one. I think would work best for the camera. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the pad a little bit right here, just a little bit, okay? And push the brake in. With my left hand here, I'm very carefully going to push the brake right up against the rim. Pushing it up against the rim while it's loose automatically lines it up with the rim in every direction it needs to be. It can be up and down, back and forth, left, right, and then also parallel with the rim. We want to get all that perfect, but that is almost automatic if you will push that pad right up against the rim while it's loose, get it parallel, and then give it a nice tightening, okay? Tighten it down, and then double check, okay? Now this looks very nice, okay? Sometimes, if the brake is completely flat with the rim, it will make a squealing noise. That's normal, and actually on a mountain bike sometimes preferred because it stops really well. But for a more recreational bike, it's a little bit annoying. If you want to point the brakes in a little bit so that they point towards the front and open out towards the back a little bit, they'll still stop great, but they won't make that noise anymore. If your brakes are squeaking, that's probably the thing, is that the rim is hitting the back part of the brake first. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and do just the other one. Same thing, I'm going to loosen it just a little bit. It can move all over the place. I'm going to push it right up against the rim nice and firmly so that it matches the rim. Make it parallel there with my finger. Tighten it down. Perfect. Okay. Now, here's the brake cable. It's loose. This is for the front one. It's loose, meaning it's not attached to the brake lever. We're going to take the same Allen key, 5mm. Loosen that cable, okay? Don't pull it out. Leave it in there. Make it easy on yourself, okay? Just leave it there nice and loose. And we're going to pull it out this way. So we have this end open, okay? Now watch very carefully here. When you open up the front brake, you'll see this little tab here has a circle in it and a slot down at the bottom. Simply take that circle on the end of the brake line, match it right into that slot. It's going to hold itself there. And then slide it into this open channel in the brake. There's also an adjustment knob here. These are also slotted. You want to line all those slots up like this. And you can slide that cable right into place. And then push the housing, this black part is called the cable housing. Push the housing right into the brake lever. Okay? Easy peasy. Now we'll go ahead and adjust the tension on the brake. So take this little silver guy here is called a noodle. Slip that right into the slot here on the right side brake. And now we've got these. All we have to do is adjust them to the rim and tighten it down. So take the cable. There's a number of ways to do this. Some people use a tool. I've never needed to use a tool. I just use my hand like this. I pinch the end of the cable and I just push against the left brake there until I get a nice tension. Maybe pull it until there's a millimeter or two clearance between the brake and the rim. And there's a little bit of trial and error on this, okay? So we'll go ahead and tighten the cable down. Don't kill it, just give it enough so that it holds it. And then go ahead and give this a few firm squeezes, okay? That'll settle all the cable into the housing and make sure there's no slack in the cable. And you'll find out how that feels. Over time as well, maybe a month into riding the bike, this may loosen a little bit too as things settle in, the cable stretches. That's totally normal. All you would do is just tighten it again. I'm finding this is a little tight right now because there's not a huge amount of movement here. So I'm actually going to loosen this just another, let it out a millimeter here, tighten again. This time I'm feeling confident, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten it the whole way. Again, don't go crazy on the torque. Just nice and firm, but don't overdo it. Okay, that feels great. This is nice movement right here. You can feel it's got a good squeeze. But there's two little tiny screws on the side of each brake arm, okay? And what they do is they adjust how strong the brake pulls. In my case right now, you can see this one's moving, this one's not. That's because this one's already against the rim. If I try to pick this up and roll the wheel, move the wheel, it's hitting the left brake pad, okay? We can center that nice and easily by going ahead and turning this little screw in. We're going to turn this clockwise, which puts pressure on the spring, making this spring stronger, pulling the brake back more, okay? It's not going to work until I give this a few squeezes and maybe a little more room. There, it's going less. And we still need a little more, so what I'm going to do, this spring seems to be very strong. I'm actually going to loosen this one a little bit by going counterclockwise on the little adjustment screw right here. Give this a few squeezes. Now, perfect. There's no rubbing at all, but it's nice and close, so we get a good firm stop. That's how you do brakes. Absolutely perfect. Should we do the back as well? Okay, so we'll do the same thing on the back. It's the same exact process. Go ahead and put the cable out of the brakes. This one's already hooked up to the lever, so you don't have to slide into the slot. I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the front ones, which is this. Go ahead and take that 5mm Allen wrench, line up the brake pad, boom. This is how we do it in real time. Should only take a few seconds once you practice on your first bike. It'll take a little while. Okay? Then I'm going to go ahead and loosen that cable. Slide it into the brakes with the noodle that I pointed out before. Pull that cable in to about the right adjustment. Tighten it up. Give that rear brake lever a few squeezes. I can feel something really settled in there, and so now it's super loose, okay? So I'm going to re-tighten it. The cable was not seated in there. There was definitely some slack. So that's good that we tested it. So we'll tighten it up again. Give some squeezes. That looks good. The right pad is touching the rim, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the adjustment screw clockwise, strengthening that spring a little bit. Maybe give it 2 or 3 turns. Try again. Now it's opening up, and the rear wheel spins nice and freely. Rubbing against this packaging though. Now, the reason why I did not attach that rear rack was just so that I could access these brakes. Once this rear rack goes in, it's a little hard to get your hands in, so it's nice to leave that undone. Let's go ahead and attach it now so that it doesn't want to move or get in the way of the rest of the bike assembly. On the 630 PAVEN Trail, the bolts for the rear rack are already in the frame, okay? So I'll do it from this side so hopefully you can see. This is going to be, in this case, a 4mm Allen wrench. Remove that from the bike. Hold on to it. Remove the other one from the frame as well. Slide the rack into place, and then put the bolts right back in where you took them out. And that will hold the rack there. These racks, by the way, are not suitable for a passenger. Some people think they are. That's kind of a dangerous move, but they are great for holding all sorts of stuff. You can put a lot of weight on these. If you're in college, for instance, you got to put all your books on there, no problem. Some people attach a crate to it. Some people hang bags that are called panniers. It makes the bike extremely, extremely useful for getting things done. Okay, now the rack is ready. Okay, now the last part of the bike assembly before pumping up the tires is we're going to adjust the brakes, the gears, I'm sorry. We adjusted the brakes, we're going to adjust the gears now, okay? Normally this is done on a bike stand because you want to be able to ideally turn the pedals while you're working on them, okay? In that case, it's a very quick process if you're able to put it into a stand. I could perfectly adjust the rear gears in about 30 or 40 seconds, actually, on a bike stand. Sometimes the front one takes a little longer. The front one's a little more art to the front derailleur than to the rear derailleur, okay? I'm going to show you how to do this very close to perfect, if not perfect, without the stand, okay? If you notice it needs a little bit of adjusting after you ride. Alright, so as I was explaining before, ideally adjusting gears, which is what we're going to do next. We're going to adjust the gears, the rear gears and the front gears. Ideally this is done on a bike stand so that you can move the wheel like this and move the pedals and adjust the gears with the bike running. Because the only way to shift gears is while you're actually moving the pedals with the derailleur system. Okay, however, we can do a really good job in the garage, and I'm going to show you how, alrighty? And again, for a high-performance road bike or for a mountain bike, you're going to go out there and really play hard. You do want to get those gears adjusted professionally. For a recreational bike like this, you can do a great job in your garage by following a few simple steps. And I will show you right now. We'll start off, you always start off with the rear gears, okay? Just so you know, this is called derailleur. Derailleur, and that's what shifts the gears, okay? Move the chain over. All we need for this is our Phillips, and I think in this case it's going to be a 9mm socket for the pinch bolt right here, okay? You see here, Louise? Okay. So the first step is go ahead and up here at the shifter, let me show you the shifter here. This is the rear shifter. It's on the right-hand side, and it has the gears numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and you shift it. In this case, there's lots of different shifters. Some are twist ones, some have triggers. This one has a trigger and a thumb shifter. Go ahead and hit the trigger one here, and you'll see this moving over to the 7. Okay, put that all the way into 7th gear on the shifter. Then if you go ahead and you pick up the bicycle, you have to move the kickstand back, pick up the rear of the bicycle and move the pedals. It's going to shift down to 7th because I just shifted all the way 7th on the shifter up here, okay? We can brake here with the right hand, the rear brake, okay? So we want to make sure the shifter is in 7th gear. That's the most important thing to start, okay? Now we'll go back here and we'll use the 9mm socket. Sometimes they use a 5mm Allen. In this case, it's the 9mm. Here, and we're going to loosen the cable. Okay? Just loosen. Again, don't make it hard on yourself. Don't completely take off that nut. It's hard to get back on. Just loosen enough so that the cable is free of the derailleur right here, okay? Now what we want to do is there are 2 little screws right here. Okay? What these do is the derailleur wants to move back and forth like this, in and out, to move the chain over onto the different gears. These 2 screws are called limit screws, and they will limit how far out and how far in the derailleur can go. Okay? If we set number 7 perfectly, then the rest of the gears will follow. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we'll set the low limit so that the derailleur doesn't go in, doesn't keep going into the wheel, into the spokes. Okay? So if you look very carefully, one of the screws will be marked H and one will be marked L. Okay? That's for the high and the low. You want to go to the H one. Okay? It is a Phillips. What we want to do is we want to, since we're in 7th on the shifter up here, and since there's a spring in the derailleur, it naturally wants to pull it into 7th gear here on its own, even with the cable not attached. We want to line up the pulleys of the derailleur with the 7th gear. The pulleys are the little wheels which hold the chain right here. We want the chain all the way down to be perfectly lined up with our 7th gear right here. All right, and we can do that using the high limit screw. If I start to turn this one right here, you'll see, maybe you can perceive, the derailleur is starting to move in like this, starting to move inward, okay? If I let go, the spring brings it back. All this screw is doing here is just pushing it inward, okay? We can also go counterclockwise and the spring will pull it back. We want to get this lined up perfectly with the 7th. So I may get in your way a little bit, I'm going to try not to. I'm going to adjust this so that it's lined up with that 7th gear. Now, sometimes what you can do too is go in just a hair more. It's better to be a little bit more towards that 6th gear than outward, and you'll see why later. Okay, this could be because of the adjusting of the cables a little bit. You want it nice and tight. Once we think that this is done, we can go ahead and pick up the bike again, pick up the rear wheel, turn the pedals and see if it's making any noise. See if it's just running in that 7th gear nicely. So it's actually, I put it in too far. It actually shifted into 6th on its own. So that means that I actually
moved the limit screw in so far that it shifted into sixth. No problem. All I have to do is loosen it a little more. Loosen it, and the spring on the derailleur will pull it back outward, which will line it up better with seventh. Now if I turn the pedals, it should go back into seventh. It needs a little bit more. And shift right into seventh, okay? The front derailleur is making a racket. That's okay. There we go. But you can hear, I'll be quiet here just a second so you can hear. There's no rattling or making any mechanical noise. Nice quiet noise. That means it's perfectly in seventh gear. Now, once we have it perfectly in seventh gear, adjusted with that limit screw, now we go take that 9mm socket again. You want to take the cable, give it a few pulls to make sure it's pulled all the way through the housing. There's no slack in the cable. Like this. Pull it nice and tight, and then go ahead and tighten down that pinch bolt. I'm going to say it again. Don't go too tight. One hand is enough. And you don't need extra leverage for torque, okay? Okay, great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to see, we know that it runs well in seventh gear. I'm going to go ahead, I'll move this up here. I'm going to take the shifter and I'm going to give it one click. Now the shifter's in sixth gear, okay? But the chain is still in seventh because we haven't turned the pedals yet. In a bike stand in a shop, they would be doing this all at the same time. And like I said, this process in a bike stand takes me about 40 seconds to perfectly adjust gears. In the garage, it's going to take a little bit longer. That's okay. We can still get it done pretty much perfectly as well. Okay. So now I put the shifter in sixth. So when I turn the pedals, it should shift into sixth gear, and it may not because the cable may not be tight enough, but we'll try it. So it does. It shifts into sixth. Okay. We'll go to 5. So again, we'll give it one click and see if we go into 5. It does. 4. It does. Okay. So this is working great. Sometimes it doesn't want to shift, and that's because the cable tension isn't tight enough. There is a little adjustment right here. Can we see that? Let's see. Right here. This can be turned. If you want to turn it counterclockwise, looking at it from the top, you'll see this little silver bit start to emerge. That will tighten the chain tension, and that will make it go more easily from 7 to 6, 6 to 5, 5 to 4, okay? In our case, we didn't have to adjust this. But if it's having trouble going to a lower gear, go ahead and turn this barrel adjuster here counterclockwise, and that will tighten up the chain for you. And tighten up the cable for you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and shift all the way up to 1. So right now we're in 3. Here's 2. And here's 1. Okay. Now once we're in 1, all we need to do with the low limit screw is make sure that the derailleur has enough room to get into the first gear, but not so much that it can actually go into the spokes. Because sometimes it is possible for the derailleur to swing in enough to go into the spokes. That would be very bad. Or it could derail the chain on the spoke side. Okay, so we'll take the low limit screw, and what we want to see is if you look at the low limit screw here on the derailleur, which is here, you can see all the way through to where it hits the stop inside the derailleur. You just want to give that, when it's in the first gear, you just want to give that about 1 millimeter of room, okay? And that will give a little bit of wiggle room to the derailleur. You can see I can push the derailleur in about an extra millimeter. That's enough to give it room to be nice and safely onto the first gear, which is the largest one, but not so much that the derailleur can actually go into the wheel, into the spokes. So we have adjusted the rear gears now, okay? Again, you can test it. The way to really test it, of course, once you're done, take it out on the street, give it a ride. While you're pedaling, you can shift through all the gears, see if it's having a hard time going in any of them. It should naturally, because of the spring, go into the higher gears, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sometimes it's a little sluggish going 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 backwards. That's because the cable isn't tight enough. In that case, you can turn the barrel adjuster counterclockwise, and then it'll go more easily, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right? Front derailleur. Front derailleurs are, like I said, a little bit more of an art to that one. But I'll show you how to do it. All we need for this is the Phillips and the 5mm Allen wrench. Did I misplace my 5mm? Here we go. I found it right here. Okay, so the first step, again, like we did with the rear derailleur, is just go ahead and loosen the pinch bolt to loosen the cable. We always want to work on these things not attached to the cable. You'll never get a good adjustment if you're trying to work under tension, under pressure, okay? A lot of people try to do that. Sometimes it can be approximated. Usually you're just really fighting, okay? So we're going to take a 5mm here, loosen that cable. Here's the cable, not attached anymore. Now, we just have a front derailleur, which the spring makes it want to pull in towards the frame of the bike. And that cable, when it's reattached, is going to be pulling the derailleur out, away, to shift the chain over onto the other gears. We have 3 chain rings up front, and then we have the 7 gears in the back, 3 times 7, 21 gears. The front derailleur, if you look, it will have a tiny little sticker on it. And this is your guide to show how to line it up with the gears. If you look, there's a little red sticker. Little red sticker here at the bottom of the derailleur. It shows a little depiction of the teeth on the gears, on the chainring, and it also shows where the front derailleur should line up with that, okay? In addition to that, you can see the front derailleur is made of 2 parallel plates right here that either push the chain this way or bring it back in. Those need to be parallel with the chain. As long as we do that, we line up with the sticker so properly up and down, and then also make sure it's parallel with the chain. Everything should shift pretty nicely. If it's not, it's easy later on to make adjustments to make it work. But again, it's a little less scientific than the rear derailleur. It's a little more of an art. So I'll go ahead and loosen the clamp bolt on the front derailleur. Again, just a little bit loose, enough loose that it basically holds in place, but that we can move it around, turn it on the tube. Loosen the clamp with the 5mm. There we go. Now I can move the derailleur back and forth, left and right. I can also move it up and down the tube here. Okay? I can move it wherever I want. Again, also because it's not attached to this cable. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the height just by moving it up or down with my hand so that the little sticker lines up properly with the teeth on the chainring, okay? And you can see there's a drawing of 2 little teeth. You want to get those lined up with the teeth on the largest chainring. And what that does is it gives about a millimeter of clearance between the chainring and the bottom of the derailleur plate. If you can visualize that, it gives about a millimeter clearance. That's what we're looking for. All right? I'm sorry, maybe about 2 millimeters. So it's about right there. I'm going to tighten the clamp down just a little bit so it holds its position a little better, but I can still move it. Now I'm going to sight and make it parallel with the chain. Again, we're going to want to do this, I'm sorry, move the pedal so the chain is in the smallest chainring. Okay, it's in the smallest chainring. Let me do this. Still not there. Okay, looks good. Double check the height. I'm not sure if the height is there. I think we're good there, but we'll know when we ride it. And if it's not quite there, we know how to adjust it. And sometimes a front derailleur can just take a little bit of going back and forth. That's how front derailleurs are. The front derailleur also has 2 limit screws. In this case, you want to set the low one first, and what you want to do is take your Phillips and go to the low limit screw, which will set how far the derailleur can come in towards the bike, and you want to turn it clockwise until that derailleur is going to be just about touching the chain, but not quite. Because what we want to do is give the chain enough clearance, but as close that as soon as you shift, it pushes that chain over. There's no big gap there. Okay. Let's see, and that is low. It's also marked low and high. And on this one, and some are different. On this one, the outside screw is the low set screw. So we should have that very close to the chain, but not so close that it rubs. And if we go back and forth like this, we can hear it's not rubbing on the plate. Let me see if I can show you that at all, what I've just done. So the inside plate is close to the chain, but not so close that it's rubbing. Okay, at this point, we have the small chain ring set. So we'll reattach the cable now. Bring the cable up. Before you do that, make sure it's all the way in first gear here on the left one, on the left shifter. That should need to be in first gear so that the chain is in the small chain ring. Tighten it down with the 5mm. All right. Now let's see if what should happen, hopefully, since we've adjusted that properly, is when we shift it into the second chain ring up here on the shifter, it will actually shift into the second chain ring. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, since we don't have a bike stand and I can't do these simultaneously, I'm going to shift first and then pedal. Shift into second. It's a little too much tension, so I'm going to pedal a little bit. It does not want to go at all. One moment. Oh. It goes around here. So I had routed the cable incorrectly. All front derailleurs are different. This one routes over the top, and I'll show you that after we shift it into the second chain ring and I make sure that I actually got it right. Okay, so let's try this again. I'm going to shift into second up here. Now I'm going to turn this, and it shifts into the middle chain ring. Okay, let me show you the routing, which I actually got wrong on my first attempt just there. Sometimes they are routed directly. Sometimes in this case, this is the PAVEN Trail, and different derailleurs are routed differently. The cable comes in, I'm going to slip my hand back behind here to show you. The cable is actually routed over the top part of the derailleur here, and then down to the pinch bolt. Okay, it just gives it more leverage. Not all front derailleurs are like that. On the 630 PAVEN Trail, that's how the derailleur is. And there should be a Shimano tourney yeah, it's a Shimano tourney, which is pretty standard for this sort of bicycle. All right, so now let's go ahead and put the shifter in number 3 and then turn the pedal. So this is great. It's not shifting, okay? So that means there's not enough tension on the cable. What we can do, there's actually an adjuster right here, a barrel adjuster. If you go ahead and turn this one in the counterclockwise direction, that will tighten that cable up, and it should push the chain over the extra distance it needs to go to get into the third chain ring. Not quite. What we may also need to do is we may need to adjust the actual adjustment of the derailleur, which we would notice especially after we do a ride. So let's see, there's second, easy, third. Now third also works. And I did that by adjusting the cable tension up here. It went from first to second very easily, but then it was having a hard time getting into third. That's because the cable, there's a little bit of slack in the cable. So when I was moving the shifter, it was actually just tightening the cable, but not yet pulling the derailleur. I tightened the cable by turning the barrel adjuster counterclockwise, which took the slack out of the cable, so that when I push the shifter, there's a direct mechanical connection, and moved it right into the largest chain ring. Okay, so now we have all 21 gears. We have the 7 in the back working and the 3 in the front working. We're really just done with this bike at this point. There's a couple little details. This one's actually important and very easy. What we want to do is go ahead and tighten the stem. So when it comes to you, it may be a little loose like this. Okay, we want to tighten that down. That's very easily done. There's 2 5mm bolts right here. You want to stand over the bike and as best you can line up the stem with the rest of the bike and also with the front wheel, okay? This is just an eyeball. I close my left eye, I close my right eye, I try to split the difference, okay? And then usually when people get on my bikes, they say, hey, the handlebars are crooked. And I say, well, you look at it and you do it. So again, just tighten these 2 bolts, tighten them evenly, a little bit on the first one, a little bit on the second one to the same tightness, then go back to the first one, tighten a little bit, second one, tighten a little bit, back and forth, tighten them nice and evenly, and just about as much as you can do with one hand with a small tool like this, okay? You can see it's plenty tight enough like that. If you go harder than that, you're going to strip the bolt and you won't be able to ride your bike until you get a new bolt, okay? All we have to do now is pump up the tires and go for a ride. We're done. When you're doing your ride, you want to first check the brakes. Yeah, you can check the shocks. Oh yeah, we have to pump up the tires. Did I mention that? Make sure you pump up the tires. If you want to look, this is important. Go ahead and just make sure that the tire is seated properly on the wheel. Just give it an eyeball. It should be perfect. Sometimes the tire can come unseated from the rim, which means the tube will come out, and when you inflate it, it could pop. Okay, so just make sure that this looks like a nice connection on both sides, and then we're going to inflate it. The PSI, the pounds per square inch, are listed on the tire. In this one's case, it should be about 65, but let's find out for sure. So this bike, you can inflate from 50 pounds to 85 pounds. 50 pounds to 85 PSI. I usually go on the higher side. It makes for easier riding. The higher the pressure, the more efficient it is, the faster it's going to go, the easier it's going to be to ride. In my opinion, there's never a reason really to have it at lower pressure. Sometimes people use it if the weather is worse. It helps for a little more grip. But normally just keep it nice and high. You'll actually find it makes it much easier. Same with your car too. You'll save a lot of gas. You don't notice in your car, but on a bicycle it makes a big difference. If you ride this at 50 PSI and then pump it up to 85, it'll really surprise you. You can notice it for sure. So we're ready to go. Make sure the first thing you do, test the brakes. Make sure it feels like you're braking safely. feel how the bike feels back and forth a little bit, left and right, and then go through all the gears. See if it's shifting smoothly, okay? If there's a little bit of problem, since we didn't have a stand and we weren't able to check it while we were doing the gear adjustment, then you can see if there's any little, any little adjustments that need to be made. If it's not going fast enough either to the higher gears or to the lower gears, if the front derailleur needs to be, made a little more parallel, move to the left or the right a little bit. But we're good to go. And that wasn't all that difficult, was it? Thanks a bunch from 630 and from me. And I'm so glad you got a bicycle because, this is one of my favorite things in life. I've never felt the peace and joy that on anything else or with anything else that I feel on a bicycle. And that's what you just pull out of a box. Peace and joy. Take care. Bye.